Welcome to episode 54 of the FoodGrads Podcast, the podcast where we explore careers in the food, beverage, and agricultural industries. I'm your host, Veronica Hislop, a PhD candidate in molecular science and career partner with FoodGrads. This week on the podcast, I interviewed Brittany Towers Lewis. Brittany, or as you might know her by her online persona, the Black Food Scientist, is found across multiple social media platforms and is the Senior Manager of Product Development at Vital Proteins. Vital Proteins helps people feel better and live fuller lives through high-quality nutrition products promoting natural beauty. They deliver a wide range of collagen products to better fit every type of lifestyle, no matter how busy or active, and to provide the tools needed for a more fulfilling wellness routine. On this episode, Brittany and I talked about what it is like being the Senior Manager of Product Development at Vital Proteins and really diving into the nitty-gritty of what the day-to-day of her job looks like. It was so cool hearing more about Brittany's career journey and how she first had maybe thought about going into the medical field, but had decided to change course, and how she ended up in food and how she is loving it. Brittany has actually worked at Pepsi-Cola, and she has had the opportunity to work on the development of new lines of flavors for Gatorade. I mean, how cool is that? I also use this opportunity in this episode to get to know a little bit more about Brittany, like why she decided to become a certified culinary scientist rather than becoming a certified food scientist, what she is currently working on in terms of her own personal development, and of course, more about the Black Food Scientist and how she is spreading awareness about food science in a way that is approachable for audiences. Brittany was so fun to talk to, and she's just doing so many cool things, and I just can't wait to share this episode with you. So, enough of that introduction. Let's get on with the show. I'm excited that I have a special guest on the show today. You might be familiar with her work online as the Black Food Scientist, doing some great things, promoting some great causes, promoting food science, and all that good stuff. So thanks for coming on the show, Brittany.
Yeah, not a problem. I'm excited.
Awesome. So for those who might not know who I'm talking to, would you be able to give us a rundown about who you are?
Yeah, sure thing. So I'm Brittany Towers Lewis. I am a food scientist. So I currently work at Vital Proteins as a senior manager for product development. And my background is in product development. I've worked in product development for, I think about 9 years, give or take. And my background is in food science. So I have a bachelor's and master's in food science from Ohio State University.
That's pretty awesome. And so tell me a little bit more about Vital Proteins. What's that about?
Yeah, so Vital Proteins, if you don't know Vital Proteins, we specialize in protein, but specifically collagen. So that's our main product, collagen for healthy hair, skin, and nails. That's what people associate collagen with, but it's also great for joints as well, which is now I think a little more talked about, which is really great. So lead the product development team. We have a team of 3 scientists and then a sensory manager, and we work on all of the innovation, renovation that Vital Proteins does for the US.
That is so exciting. That's so cool because yes, for sure, it is definitely a more talked about type of would I say supplement? Is that the correct term to use for this?
Yeah, so most of what Vital Proteins makes are dietary supplements. We do make some food and beverage products, like we have collagen waters and we have protein bars, which are under the food and beverage space.
Oh, that's really cool because I know not everyone always wants to just go, take a scoop in their water and all that. People are on the go, would rather just have whole food like a granola bar. So that's cool because I know that it's something that came on my radar because I've always, even though I'm in this space, I've always been confused about supplements and all that because I think that it's a bit of a confusing subject, especially to be in tune with your diet, to know what you're deficient in or what's actually working. There's so many minor things that you don't realize could affect your overall mental health, physical health, and all that. So that's cool. Yeah. So tell me, so you mentioned that you were the senior manager of product development. And though I want to jump into that, I actually want to, because of something that you had mentioned prior to our conversation, I want to talk about your career journey and just how you got into product development. I know there might be a little story behind that.
Yeah. So when I was in college, I was actually a biology major. I was pre-med for a very short while, like A lot of people start out pre-med, I think, in
I think
college.
so. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Everyone's like, oh, I'm going to be a doctor. And then I was like, oh, I don't think I want to do that. But I stayed in the biology major. I've always been interested in science, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I didn't know what I wanted to do with a biology major. I was like, I don't think I want to work in a biology lab, or I didn't really know what I could do with it besides go to med school, honestly. So I was like, I need to change my major because I was getting into some of the major classes for biology. I wasn't super interested in them. I was getting bored. And I was like, I need to do something that I actually really like. So I have always loved cooking. I've always loved food. That's something that has been a passion of mine. And actually, I used to watch Good Eats with my dad all the time. And I feel like that's like how a lot of people kind of were like, oh yeah, that's like kind of food science. So, and I remember I told my dad, I was like, oh, I want to be Alton Brown when I get older. Like, I want to do that. I want to be on TV, just like talking about food. My mom actually told me about the food science major when I was a freshman. So fast forward, this is my junior year when I'm trying to change my major. And I told my mom my freshman year because food science is the College of Agriculture at Ohio State. And I was like, I don't want to be a farmer, which is so ridiculous. Like, I was like, what was I thinking? I mean, you're a freshman, you don't know anything. I didn't know anything. Yeah. So I didn't know anything. So I revisited food science. So I looked both at nutrition and food science because nutrition I've also always been interested in as well. But food science seemed like it fit me a lot better. So I changed my major in the middle of my junior year. Ohio State was on quarters at that time. So it was probably like third quarter of my junior year. Changed my major, never looked back. I'm so glad that I did it because I found something that I absolutely love. And actually, food science helped me understand a lot of science concepts better because I'm a very like tactical and tangible learner, and I need something that it's a real world example, which food is obviously a really great real world example because we have to eat, and I do enjoy cooking a lot. I just am so glad that I found food science and that Ohio State offered food science as a major. Yeah.
I gotta shout out to Alton Brown, and I still think it's so funny how he's probably inspired so many like food science students, but yet he went to school for like theatrics. Like, he's not even an actual food scientist. I think that is so funny.
Yeah, which is hilarious. But because I didn't really know food science was something that you could do, which obviously now I'm like, yeah, it makes complete sense. And when I tell people what I do, they're like, oh, I get it.
And I think as well, and I don't know if it was also airing for you, they also had that show like Top 5, or like that manufacturing show that was also on the Food Network.
Yeah. Or How It's Made.
Yeah. And then they would have, I think there's like this classic picture that like floats around online where it's like ranch scientists and like they study. So I know exactly where you're coming from with exposure, but it's great that you had your parents who were helping you out in terms of your career, and they pushed you without pushing you into something that you really love.
Exactly. Yeah. So then I felt like I wasn't in the food science major long enough. So I decided to get my master's degree, which I'm actually really glad that I stayed because I think I expanded my knowledge on a lot of things when I was in grad school.
And was that a research-based grad course, or was it a course-based?
It was both. So it was a thesis graduate program, but also had to take courses.
Oh, that's awesome. That's so cool. I think that at least with my graduate experience, like being in the lab, feels very similar to what I would expect somewhat to like being in product development in terms of that same coming up with an idea, going with it, doing the multiple iterations of something, and then presenting your ideas.
Yeah, definitely.
So moving on with that, I know that you then started to work after you graduated, after your master's degree, you started to work at Pepsi Cola, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that is correct. So I worked at PepsiCo for almost 8 years, right? Yeah. So just under 8 years. So I started right out of school, started working on Gatorade. So I moved to Chicago, which in Chicago is where this is no longer true anymore because Pepsi actually just closed the office that I used to work in. But Quaker Tropicana and Gatorade R&D was located right outside Chicago. So I started working on Gatorade innovation. So for the US, which was really cool. I launched some Gatorade flavors, worked on energy chews, and worked a little bit on organic Gatorade as well. Didn't launch that because then I moved to work on international Gatorade. So I did that for about 4 years. I worked on everything outside the US, which was a really awesome experience. I got to go to some cool places and learn a lot about different cultures because I got to work with multiple different countries and different regions with a variety of different people. So it was a wonderful experience.
I have to dive more into that. But before I do, I just have to say, just to goes to show about like how foods and like products like this like really shape. A few years ago, my mom actually, she had gotten cancer and she got an ileostomy bag, and basically she had to drink a lot of fluids, and like water was one of the things that she could drink, but the only other thing that she could really handle and would actually keep her hydrated was like Gatorade. So like Gatorade became like our go-to thing, like particularly G2. So like knowing that you worked in that place, it's like a really special place for me now.
Oh, wow. Oh, that I'm glad that I guess maybe brought up some memories for you.
It did. As soon as I saw that, I was like, oh, that's so cool, because she's very particular with flavors. And it was like the one thing I was like the sure thing. I was like, okay, buying the Gatorade. And I never realized how much a product could actually like really make a difference in someone's life. I really felt it there. So that's awesome.
Oh, that's so good to hear. Another question, I guess, for you is favorite flavor.
For me, I like the ice one, the blue one. And then for her, it was definitely the grape G2 particularly.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that was one of the ones you worked on, but
no, I think the Glacier Freeze, that's the light blue one. That's probably one of my favorite flavors. I did not work on that, but that's my favorite flavor too.
It's very good. It's just something you don't get in any other like company. I don't know. I just thought it's like a really unique flavor. Like you can get grape anywhere, but that one's like unique. But anyways, enough about me. I just wanted to share that because I just want to show like how, and like as food scientists, like the products that you make, it might not be like a chef in a restaurant, but really can play a big role in people's lives. So
yeah, thanks for sharing.
Yeah. And so tell me, you were able to, you did so much. I'm looking at all the different projects you worked at, and tell me, like, how was that experience? Like, you know what, let's talk about what it was like working on flavor development and products. So maybe start from there.
Yeah. So I really liked working on Gatorade flavor development, mostly because when I worked on new Frost flavors, which the Frost line is the line that Glacier Freeze falls under. So this would be like lighter, crisper flavors. Got to launch 3 different flavors, and kind of the marketing team was like free reign on what flavors do you want to see. So we started with 12 that I had developed and narrowed it down to 4 of them, and then ended up launching 3. So it's just really fun to do different flavor pairings, especially in the Frost line, since they are those fanciful names like Glacier Freeze, Riptide Rush, Arctic Blitz. So we can kind of put flavors that are unexpected, since Gatorade is mostly drank by like teenage to young 20s people. So some flavors, if they see like plum, they'd be like, oh, I wouldn't want a plum. But if you put it in a Frost flavor and call it, I don't know, purple cast, then they're like, oh, this is delicious. And it also gets people to try new flavor profiles.
I think that the names of these types of drinks, like in general, is just so much fun. I know there was like, I don't even know, it was like brain candy or like stuff like that. It's just like, how does that does the flavor come first, or does it come to concept? Like, I think there's so much cool marketing going on.
Yeah, definitely. So usually like a lot of the Frost flavors, those cool colors. So like the greens, the blues, purples, and usually the flavor and then the name comes. So I actually just brainstormed names, which was a lot of fun. Yeah.
So like when it comes to like a typical day in terms of product development, well, I know that every day is not typical, but like, would you be able to like maybe expand a little bit more on like some of the stuff that you'd be doing throughout, let's say like throughout the week, let's say?
Yeah, so definitely, I mean, working in the lab, I don't work in the lab as much as I used to, but that's a huge part of product development. So getting a project brief and developing against that. So we're going to make a ready to drink smoothie. And it's okay, what are the nutritionals that have to be in the smoothie? Do we have to have certain vitamins, minerals? What fruits do we have to have? Do we have to have any vegetables? What ingredients can we use? What ingredients do we want to stay away from? How much sugar should this have? There's a lot of things that go into developing a product that I think sometimes people don't realize. And then apart from just having like making the product and making it taste good, we also have to think about the processing. So how are we going to process this? What type of bottle is it going to go in? Is it going to go in a plastic bottle? Is it going to go in a Tetra Pak, which are those like little, I guess, like square cardboard? I'm like having my hands up, like people can see me. Like the square cardboard containers, which like both of those have different processing requirements depending on what kind of package it's in. So taking all of that into consideration and developing a product that tastes good, meets the nutritional guardrails that were set out, and then also is safe for people. Safety is obviously number one. You don't want to make anyone sick from anything that you sell.
That makes sense. It's amazing to me. Like I say this every time that products even get made because you can make something on the benchtop, but then as soon as you start to scale things, work with other people, like I don't even know how things get done, honestly.
Yeah, because it's definitely cross-functionally. Like it's not only scientists, like R&D and quality, you're working with brand management, you're working with supply chain, making sure that you can get the ingredients that you need. That's actually very difficult right now. I was actually talking about this with someone today because I think a lot of consumers don't realize when there's turmoil in the world, how much that affects the food supply. A lot of companies try to shield customers from that or consumers from that. But with a lot of things that are going on in the world, it's hard to get ingredients for food products because not every food is grown in the United States.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
What do you mean by shielding though?
So essentially trying to keep the same ingredients that they always have had and try not to raise prices for consumers, if that makes sense.
Okay, that makes more sense. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I hear about a lot of stuff on the news and, you go to the store and you expect your ready-made product to be exactly what it was like 2 years ago, 3 years, and it doesn't matter if there's like a wheat shortage and you're buying like, I don't know, wheat crackers, you just want them there. And I think sometimes though, you forget when it's on the shelf that it actually was like a food product with the whole farming and supply chain and all that. And it's not just magically poofs out of like a factory.
Yeah, exactly. Like when the war in Ukraine started, Ukraine actually produces most of the world's sunflower crops, which people are like, oh, okay, sunflowers. But sunflowers are used to make oil, used to make a lot of other products. So when there were no more sunflowers, you can't get sunflower oil anymore. And then companies are like, okay, we have to have another type of oil. So then it just creates this whole supply chain nightmare because everyone's trying to get the same thing and there's none of it. So yeah.
I know it's very interesting right now, and I know it doesn't directly affect, but that's one of the reasons like why I want to try to promote like the food industry and that have more people aware of their food systems, maybe get more people working because I know that also becomes an issue like labor shortages and all that fun stuff. But in terms of you again, one of the things that I've kind of got curious about because obviously like with all that you've done with just like looking at the products you've worked in, it seems like you love what you're doing and such, but I wanted to know, do you have any like habits or rituals that you do to help you be successful at your job?
Ooh, that's a great question. It's funny. I actually yesterday we have access to LinkedIn Learning and I took a LinkedIn Learning on how to have a happier work week, which I thought was interesting, but they talked a lot about rituals in that LinkedIn Learning. And it's before 2020, pre-COVID, I had a very routine schedule. I take the train to work, I'd go home, work out immediately after work, and then do some things at home and then cook and then get ready for my next day. Now that it's more fluid a little bit, so I'm not in the office every day, I don't have as much of a routine. So I'm trying to get back to that. So as far as rituals, I'm trying to build them back up, but definitely making time for myself is something that's really important because sometimes I think we neglect ourselves a lot. I know I do. And making time for myself, even if it's just 45 minutes so I can go work out or 30 minutes so I can have just some time to myself to think, because I feel like I don't have time to think sometimes. So just, yeah.
No, it's funny that when I was giving out the question, I was expecting like, oh, be organizing or blah, blah, like that type of stuff. But to hear you say, take time for yourself, like I like that one. I definitely like that one.
Yeah, because it's really hard. It's hard when you're working all the time. And then I'm also a fitness instructor. So
Oh my.
I do my day job. I do that. And then I also do things on social media. So it's it's really taking time for myself and also my family, like my husband and my dog. So really trying to be more cognizant of that.
That makes sense. And, and speaking of social media, I couldn't go through this whole podcast with not talking more about you being crazy and doing even more stuff with your busy schedule and then doing more social media. So tell us more or tell me more about, why did you even start doing the Black Food Scientist?
Yeah. So I started it, I think it was 2021. That sounds about right. And it was around the time so the vaccines were rolling out. A lot of people had this kind of distrust in science, or kind of there's like a mystery around science. And a lot of people didn't understand a lot of things that were going on with COVID, with vaccines, albeit I am not an expert in any of that. But being in a science field, I was like, okay, so how can I help get people to be more comfortable with science? Because science to many kind of seems like this nebulous thing. It's very confusing. People just use big words and don't explain things so most people can understand them. So I started my page off of that, trying to make science more approachable for people, because I think food is a great way to teach science because we all have to eat. So it's very tangible for people. Like I said earlier, it helped me understand a lot of science concepts better because it was very tangible for me. I was like, okay, I understand the Maillard reaction because I can actually see it happening. So that was the main reason I started it. Another reason was to get awareness out for food science. I didn't know what it was, and I wish I did earlier, but it's okay. I might have gotten to the same place. But also to not only awareness, but awareness, especially to minorities, because that's something that I didn't know any food scientists at all. I guess Elton Brown, but he's not even a food scientist. And especially having people that are minorities in the space. So then other people can see people that look like them and they're like, oh, I can also do this. Since food science is unique in that I feel like it's actually probably more women than men as compared to a lot of other science fields. But it's really important that people from like the BIPOC community have others to look at and say, okay, I can also do that too, because there's other people in this space.
Well, I love that. And to be honest, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring on the show, just to bring awareness to people like you who are doing awesome things in the food science community. And I was going through your TikToks and such, and even just for Black History Month, I know that you had done some videos on some famous like food scientists. And I loved that because I'll be honest, I didn't know any. And I thought it was really cool just to spread awareness about that. So I really commend you for doing that. And I hope you really keep up with it because I think that the community needs to see more of that type of thing.
Yeah, definitely. I've been on a lapse of posting videos.
It's okay. It gets so obviously just talking from you, just trying to get your head around work and all that, and then doing things on top of that. But it's one of those things where I hope that maybe you can inspire some more individuals to start sharing their story, and then takes a little less pressure off of you, and others can go as well.
Yeah, definitely. I also sometimes do some talks or things for schools. And it's so fun because I'll have people like on my TikTok page and be like, oh, you came and talked to my school or you talked at this event and I'm interested in food science. Like if I like touch one person wherever I go, I call that a win. So it's really great.
I love that. And I wish too, like it's funny, I wanted to go into food science that's what I wanted to go to school for, but I never got actually into the program for it, strangely enough. But I never was exposed to food science. And I have to agree with you in terms of food science being like tangible. Like I did do a chemistry major, but I always just felt in the back of my mind that food was just so much of a better way of understanding the same concepts because I have a book with me on like physical chemistry of foods. And I just find it so much easier to understand when you can have like a mental image, because talking about metals and chelating and all that, it's just not something that's like intuitive. But if you see the Maillard reaction, like you're talking about, you're like, oh, it's because of this chemical reaction. So it's such a fun science, and I hope more people know about it.
Yeah, me too.
Gotta ask, do you have any favorite food science facts?
Oh, favorite food science facts. I don't even know if this is really a food science fact, but something that was somewhat popular. I did a video on it that people just didn't know was how to defrost food faster. Because a lot of people are like, oh, if I just leave it on my counter, like that's fine. And I was like, don't do that. A, it's actually not going to really defrost that fast. And B, it's somewhat dangerous from a food safety perspective. So I told people, I was like, if you need it fairly quickly, I was like, if you just put it in a bowl of cold water, it'll actually defrost way faster than in the refrigerator or even on your counter, because water helps conduct heat better than like the air in your refrigerator. And people are like, oh my gosh, I feel like you just saved me so much time.
Yeah, it's mind-blowing when you find out about something like that. And then pointing out the food safety aspect, which is a whole nother avenue of foods like science that is just as paramount as making the products. Like this is where like your biology could come in, but food science is a beast on its own.
It really is. It encompasses almost every science into one thing, like a little bit of each science in one. It's also interesting. Food safety, I feel, is, for whatever reason, on social media, such a controversial topic. I feel like, because
really
people are like, oh, I don't use different cutting boards for meats and vegetables. And I was like, that's fine. And they're like, I haven't gotten sick. If people don't think they've gotten sick from doing something that is somewhat questionable, then they're like, I'm just going to continue to do it. And I'm like, that's fine. That's you. I'm not going to do it. But
yeah, food safety, like in terms of making it like good for a good social media, like bringing awareness for food safety. It's like, how do you do that in a way that's actually enjoyable? It's such a hard thing to talk about, even though it's like, I don't know, it's like me and my partner, like we're talking about leftovers and he's, oh yeah, it's we made pasta sauce like a week ago, and then he made some like more pasta and then added the sauce to the pasta, and I was like, we shouldn't eat that. And he's, no, it's fine. I made more pasta. And I was like, but it's from a week ago. You can't just make it new. It's like a new thing all of a sudden. So I don't know. It's something, but it's honestly, it's again, coming back to the thing. And with what you're doing online, I like that you're also doing it in such a short, easy to digest way with your face. And I think that's also another key thing, is just you talking and just being there, because I think having a face to it, instead of, I know that a lot of like these food science ones, they like to just put the text and then like a picture and then that's it, which I'll be honest, like I raise my hand because I'm bad for doing that. But you actually like showing your face, like I think it just makes it so much more approachable.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. The reason I kept it at 60 seconds is because before, TikTok limited you to 60 seconds.
Oh,
but like last year. But I also think that we have really bad attention spans now, especially with technology. Like my attention span is really bad. If an article is really long, I'm like, oh, I can't read that. That's too long. But I feel like if 60 seconds isn't that long, so someone can watch something and learn something in just a minute, then that's great, because they watch the whole video. Instead of watching a 10-minute video, you're like, oh, I can learn something in just a minute. It's harder. Maybe it doesn't look easy. I was like, it's harder than it looks. It's hard to get some stuff into 60 seconds.
Oh, I can imagine. Honestly, you're making it look flawless on there, because maybe it's not flawless with your chair. I saw your poor chair. Are you on the chair right now?
I am not. I'm in our office now.
That's good. The poor chair. With you're sharing this type of knowledge in that, but is there anything that you're actually trying to learn more right now about the food industry, or maybe there's some kind of skill that you're working on? Because I know that product development is always about continuously learning.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm looking into that. That's a great question, because we have an education stipend. So I'm trying to figure out what I want to use it on.
That is so cool.
I'm thinking about taking a little bit more classes on nutrition, because that's something that has always interested me. And I got a little bit in school, but not a ton. So that's something that I'm interested in. And then obviously, like, culinary has always been a passion of mine. So really continuing to hone my own culinary skills and just learn more, hopefully traveling some more, because I feel like a lot of culinary ideas and also like product development just really comes from being well-rounded.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. See, again, like with so many things, like as a food science, like you can take where you want to go in terms of that.
Hmm.
And just out of curiosity, like with nutrition, like that's such a broad subject in itself as well. Like,
Yeah, I know.
is there anything in particular that's eyeing you?
So there's a few like certifications that you can get like for human nutrition specifically. So it's like a little more broad, but just like deep diving into human nutrition and like what's best for different people, learning how different people need different or have different nutrition needs. So more like that's something that I'm very interested in.
Oh, that's really cool. And what one other thing that you had mentioned is that you were thinking about like more of the culinary, but I did
Hmm.
notice that if I'm not mistaken, you already have you're a certified research chef, correct?
Yeah, I'm a certified culinary scientist, but
Okay.
so that's for food scientists that kind of get the culinary background. So certified research chef is for a chef, so someone with a culinary degree that then gets the food science background. So they're like
Uh,
swapped. If that makes sense.
okay.
Yeah. So that experience was really awesome. I spent 4 weeks, 4 separate weeks learning from chefs from the Culinary Institute of America. So did like deep dive every day into a variety of different things. I learned a ton. We did a whole week on global cuisine, which was really awesome. So every day was a different region of the world, which is really great. And then the rest of it was essentially just like classic French cooking
That
and
is
techniques.
cool. I'm jealous.
Yeah. Yeah, that
I'm
was really great.
jealous.
But I was like, I want to do more, especially around the global aspect and learn more about a lot of different cuisines. I think I do that by eating because Chicago has, honestly, some wonderful restaurants, but just really learning more about different ingredients because there's so many ingredients out there that I don't even know. I don't know a lot of them. So just really wanting to learn more.
I think that's also a cool thing to point out because even without knowing a lot of ingredients, of course, there's more. There's from the perspective of sustainability because, maybe if
Hmm.
there's ingredients you don't know a lot about, maybe others don't know, then that means that, we can. I'm thinking like salmon, for example. Like I know that's a fish, but, everyone knows salmon, but maybe the less. My train of thought's leaving me. Maybe there's like a type of fish that's less used, so maybe we can increase that. But even just like knowing more about global cuisine because I feel like I know how you feel because I'm in the Toronto area. So there's like it when I go somewhere that's not Toronto, I forget that not every place has this many options to go to in terms of
Yeah.
like global cuisine. But no, it's really cool. That's something you want to explore. And man, I want to do your job. It sounds so cool, but like also another thing that was on my head is because I know you chose that, but why didn't you go for like IFFT? They have a certification for scientists. Was there a reason why you chose maybe to go more towards that rather than being a certified food scientist?
I think mostly because I'm a lot more interested in culinary, and I also got a master's in food science, so I didn't know what the certified food scientist like how much it would add versus the culinary scientist because I felt like taking more culinary classes would broaden my knowledge versus delving more into food science, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense now that I
Yeah.
think about it, especially doing it at a level where like at the master's level, they could really push past that foundational knowledge. So that makes more sense. Huh. And then another thing that I was thinking about as well was how was the transition between going from a master's degree or even just going from school to like a full-time job? Was that like a difficult thing for you? Did you find a hard time finding a job? Did you have any advice about that?
Yeah. So I graduated in 2013. The job market was pretty decent, I think, when I graduated. It's really funny. So, also my story of how I started at Pepsi. So, I didn't remember applying for any job there,
Okay.
which is really funny. Apparently, I did though. I guess I just applied to a lot of jobs, but it was for an engineering job, which I am not an engineer, clearly. But they interviewed me for it anyway because they were interested in the research that I was doing in grad school, specifically for this engineering role. So I went out, did an in-person interview for this role, and they didn't call me back for like months. And I was like, oh, okay, I don't know. I was like, they normally tell you if you don't get a job. I didn't know. So then a few months later, they called me and they were like, okay, they filled the engineer role with an engineer. I was like, okay, that makes sense.
Yes.
That's probably better. They were like, but there's a product development role open if you're interested. And I was like, yeah, that's actually what I wanted to do anyway. That actually works out perfectly. Yeah. So it was funny. The team that I ended up working with, I never met any of them in person. I just talked to 3 people on the phone, and then they gave me an offer letter the next day.
That is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was crazy. I will say that that's probably a rare story. But with that, I will say if there's anything that like looks remotely interesting to you, as far as a job when you are graduating, I would say apply for it. People probably have other, I don't know, advice for this. I'd say it doesn't hurt because it didn't hurt me. It actually helped me. So definitely that. As far as the transition from college to, I will say adulthood, because that's like really when I was like really on my own because I was moving to a different state. I'm originally from Ohio. That was about 2 hours from my parents. It was a little difficult. Mostly it's more making friends when you move to a new place and you're not in school anymore. You're like, where do I make friends at work? And then you like branch out from there. I was very thankful to have the same start date as 2 of my really amazing, great friends now. So I've made a great network while I was at Pepsi, and then also got to make some wonderful friends while I've been in Chicago. So I'd say that was like one of the harder things for me, like leaving the state that I've been in my entire life, going somewhere else, and then having to make new friends. But yeah, it's been great. I absolutely love Chicago.
I think there's 2 things to highlight from that is like the first of all, there must have been something from your work, even though you say it was like lucky, but at the same time, it shows that like your work demonstrated something, like there had to have been something that really stood out. So have confidence in yourself that like someone can see you for another role. That just means your work gets noticed, even though you might not notice it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
And then the other thing as well is just, again, coming to that point about, when I come on the podcast, it's, oh, let's talk about your job. Let's talk about all this. But there's so many other factors like outside of work that really affect your life and all of that.
Yeah.
And it's not just like a vacuum of your job is that all you do. And, making friends is not something you would directly link to like how you do at work, but, links to your happiness and like how you like to go in. So.
Yeah, exactly. Also, one thing that I don't know if this wasn't a huge adjustment, but I think in grad school or even in college, random spots of free time, like in the middle of the day, and you don't have that when you go to a full-time job. I can't, like, it's 2 p.m. I can't just go, I don't know, do whatever.
Yeah.
So that took some like getting used to, because it forces you to be on a schedule. Not saying that I was on a schedule in school loosely. I had classes that I had to take, but other than that, it was like fairly loose. But having a full-time job, you have to be more on a schedule. Okay, I'm at work from this time to this time. I have to either drive there or take public transportation, then get home. I have to feed myself.
Yeah, that's it's funny that you have to think about that when all you do is think about food.
Yeah, exactly. Some people are like, do you actually like cook when you go home? And I was like, yeah, I love cooking. I don't really cook at work, really.
That makes sense. No, it's funny you mentioned that because I did my undergraduate and then I worked for a year and then I went to grad school. And actually when I was working, I absolutely loved having the schedule. It's actually one thing I actually, in a strange way, I don't like about grad school is that there is no like schedule. Like my days have nothing. And I'm just like, I want the structure. So I make structure for myself. But, it's also like on the back of my mind sometimes when you're seeing like, your lab mates like in on like random times. And sometimes it's hard to disconnect because you're like, I guess I could be at the lab if I wanted to be. That's a nice thing about working full time.
Yeah, definitely.
And, we're getting to the end of the episode. And, I always like to ask my guests, what advice would you give students looking to go into a career like yours?
Yeah. So I usually always give this advice, which is it's never too late to do something that you're passionate about, and just find whatever passion that is and go for it. So I did talk about how I changed my major in the middle of my junior year, which is super late to be like changing a major. People are like, oh, wow, you did that late, but I have no regrets. I'm so glad that I did it. Yes, it was more work. Yes, I had to take classes over the summer. I am so glad because I'm in a field and a job that I really love. And if I hadn't done this, then I don't know, who knows where I'd be. But I say it's never too late. Like people are like, oh, I wish I found food science. I was like, it's not too late to try to get in the field. You don't necessarily have to have a degree in food science to become a food scientist. I know a lot of people that I work with don't have food science degrees. Just a general science degree, you can get in the door starting out, maybe not doing product development, but maybe doing something else at a food company and working your way to where you want to be. Or maybe finding out that maybe quality is what you really like. Maybe that's what you're really passionate about and that's where you want to be. Maybe food safety is where you want to be. Maybe you want to become a flavorist. There's so many jobs within food science that you can do that it's really great.
I'm going to leave that there because I think that is excellent advice. And it's funny that you say it's never too late, but it was only like changing, you're so early on in your career at that point. You weren't even in your career and you're already making this change to, switch majors. But at the time, it seems like such a big, trajectory of your life. And obviously it was a change, but it just seems you have so little time when you're in like college, but yet you just started off like.
No, exactly. Because I think people are like college 4 years and then I need to move on.
Yeah, which albeit sometimes it is best for some people to just get out of there. But if it's going to be something that could really change the trajectory of your life and like, that is, then go for it. I think it's great. Yeah. Thank you so much, Brittany, for coming on the show. I'm so happy that we were able to sit down and you can talk to me about the wonderful world of food science, because obviously I'm a glutton and I went back to school to do some food science. So it's such an amazing topic and I love having people who love it just as me sharing it with everyone.
Oh, awesome. Thanks for having me on.